Step beyond the silken curtains and into one of the most secret and misunderstood places in history, the Ottoman Imperial Harem. Forget the fantasies you've seen in Western paintings, filled with lounging women dedicated only to pleasure. The real harem was a golden cage, a cutthroat school, a family, and a political battlefield all rolled into one. For the women inside, daily life was a mix of strict routine, rigorous education, and deadly rivalries. A single glance from the Sultan could be a path to unimaginable power, or a swift path to their grave. This is the true story of the women who lived, fought, and ruled from inside the forbidden halls of the Ottoman Harem. The word harem itself comes from the Arabic harem, meaning a sacred forbidden place. It was the private, secluded heart of the Sultan's household, but it was so much more than a home. It was an institution, and the women who entered its walls came from every corner of the known world. With the exception of the Sultan's own daughters and female relatives, no one was born inside. Instead, they arrived in one of three ways: as captives of war, as gifts from foreign leaders, or bought from the sprawling slave markets of the empire. Imagine a young girl from the Caucasus Mountains, prized for her beauty, or from the plains of modern-day Ukraine. Captured in a raid or even sold by her family, she would be forced on a long, terrifying journey that ended in the bustling markets of Istanbul. There, palace agents would inspect and purchase her. It was the end of one life and the beginning of another, completely uncertain one. They were slaves, yes, but not destined for hard labor. They were headed for the Topkapi Palace, the glittering center of Ottoman power. Once they arrived, these young women, called Kariye, were stripped of their old names and identities. They were given new Turkish or Persian names like Gulnar, pomegranate flower, or Nergis, daffodil. They were now part of the Sultan's extended household, a status that bound them to him in servitude, but also offered a strange kind of protection and opportunity. They weren't just property anymore. They were part of an imperial institution. The first experience was one of shock and discipline. The harem was a massive complex of up to 400 rooms, a labyrinth of marble courtyards, lavish apartments, baths, kitchens, and even its own hospital and mosque. It was a self-contained world, a community of hundreds, sometimes over 1,000, women. A new girl would be placed under the care of a kalfa, a senior woman who acted as her governess, teaching her the absolute basics of her new life. This wasn't a prison in the way we think of one, but its walls were real. Women could leave the harem, but only with permission, under specific circumstances, and always heavily veiled. The seclusion was a symbol of the Sultan's power, a sign that he could afford to protect the women of his household from the outside world. But this protection cost them their freedom. Their pasts were gone, their families left behind forever. They entered a world with rules they didn't understand, where their entire future depended on their ability to adapt, learn, and climb a complex ladder of power from the very bottom. The journey into the harem wasn't just physical. It was a complete remaking of who they were. If you're picturing the harem as just a chaotic collection of women, think again. It was one of the most rigidly structured places on earth. A strict pyramid of power where every single person knew their place. This hierarchy was the key to its stability and the ladder an ambitious woman could climb. At the very top of this world was the Valide Sultan, the Queen Mother. As the mother of the reigning Sultan, her authority was nearly absolute. No one entered or left the harem without her permission. She managed its vast finances, oversaw the education of every woman, and even chose concubines for her son. The Valide Sultan was, in many ways, one of the most powerful people in the entire Ottoman Empire, her influence at times rivaling even that of the Grand Vizier. Beneath her were the Sultan's main consorts. The most senior was the Bashkadin, Khams, or First Woman. A sultan could have up to 4 of these Kadins, who were treated as official wives. Their power came directly from their closeness to the Sultan and, more importantly, the chance that their son might one day sit on the throne. Next in line were the Iqbal-Zes, or the fortunate ones. These were the favored concubines who had caught the Sultan's eye and shared his bed. If an Iqbal had a child, especially a son, her status, her income, and her influence would skyrocket. She'd get her own apartment and servants, a huge step up from the communal living spaces. And at the very bottom of this pyramid were the Kariye. This was the largest group, the novices and the general population who did the daily work that kept the harem running. They were maids, laundresses, and assistants to the high-ranking women. Most Kariye would never even meet the Sultan, but for those who were exceptionally beautiful, smart, or talented, the path to the top was open. An odalisque, as the West called them, could be trained as an entertainer and, if she got lucky, be presented to the Sultan. This entire female world was guarded and run by a unique class of men, the eunuchs. Since Islamic law forbade the act of castration, these men were captured or bought as slaves from places like North Africa and castrated by others before being brought to the palace. This made them third-gender individuals in the court's eyes, able to move between the male world of the court and the female world of the harem. They were split into two groups. The white eunuchs served in the palace's administrative areas. The black eunuchs, mostly from the Nile Valley, were the true guardians of the harem. Their leader was the most powerful eunuch of all, the Kuslar Asa, or the chief black eunuch. This man was the Valida Sultan's right hand. He controlled all access to the harem and had the Sultan's ear, giving him tremendous influence. So much so that at certain times in history, his power was considered second only to the Grand Vizier himself. This intricate system created a world of intense competition. Every woman was part of a relentless struggle for status, security, and the Sultan's favor. It was a world built on strict rules, but within those rules, a woman could rise from a nameless slave to a matriarch of immense power. So, what was a typical day actually like? The fantasy of idle days spent lounging on silk cushions couldn't be further from the truth. Life in the harem was disciplined, highly structured, and centered around something that might surprise you: education. The harem wasn't a den of sensuality, it was more like an elite boarding school for women. The day began at dawn with the call to prayer. After prayers and a light breakfast, lessons started. For the new arrivals, or achemi, this education wasn't optional. It was intense. They learned to read and write, a privilege very few women outside the palace had. They studied the Quran and Islamic theology, but the curriculum didn't stop there. They learned Turkish and Persian, history, geography, and even basic math, which was essential for anyone who might one day manage a large household or a charity. Beyond academics, their education was designed to create perfectly refined ladies of the court. They were trained in music, learning to play instruments like the Ottoman harp. They learned to sing, dance with grace, and write poetry. They also mastered practical skills like sewing and embroidery. Above all, they were schooled in adab, the complex code of court etiquette. They learned how to walk, talk, and serve their superiors with perfect poise. Discipline was strict. A disobedient girl could be punished, while one who excelled was rewarded with privileges. This training was on par with the education given to the male pages in the palace. In fact, for many of these women, the ultimate goal wasn't to catch the Sultan's eye, but to graduate. A well-educated woman from the harem was a highly sought-after bride. The Sultan often arranged their marriages to high-ranking officials like viziers and governors. These marriages were a key tool for creating loyalty, tying powerful men directly to the dynasty. For the women, it was a path to a life of status and security as the mistress of a powerful home. Of course, a select few, the most brilliant and charming, were trained for a different destiny, to be presented to the Sultan. Even this was a formal process, often overseen by the Valid Sultan herself. The chosen girl would be bathed, perfumed, and dressed in the finest silks before being led to the Sultan's chambers. If she pleased him, and if that night led to a child, her life was changed forever. Life wasn't all work, though. Women socialized in communal halls, visited each other, and spent hours in the hammam, the Turkish bath, which was a primary social hub. Children filled the halls, boys stayed with their mothers until around age 7, and girls stayed until they were married. It was the atmosphere of a large, complex, and often very tense extended family. This daily routine shows the harem's true purpose. It wasn't a playground. It was a system designed to produce women who were either perfect wives for the empire's elite or perfect companions for the Sultan. Women who were not just beautiful but cultured, intelligent, and ready to navigate the treacherous world of the court. While discipline defined daily life, the ultimate prize was the Sultan's attention, and for one 16th-century woman, catching his attention was just the first step. Her story would shatter centuries of tradition and start an era where women held shocking levels of power. Her name was Harem Sultan, but the West knew her as Roxolana. She didn't come from a noble house. Born in what is now Ukraine, she was captured by raiders and ended up in the slave markets of Istanbul. From there, she was chosen for the Imperial Harem of the new Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent. In a palace filled with beauties, Harem stood out. It wasn't just her famous red hair, it was her spirit. Her name, Harem, means the cheerful one, and her joyful nature completely captivated the young Sultan. She quickly became his favorite, pushing aside her main rival, Mahidevran, who was the mother of Suleiman's eldest son. Suleiman was so smitten that he began to break all the rules for her. First, he ignored the one concubine, one son policy, a tradition meant to stop any one woman from gaining too much influence. Harem gave Suleiman not one child, but 6, including 5 sons, cementing her position. But her ambition went much further. Normally, a concubine would leave the capital when her son was sent to govern a province. Harem had no intention of leaving the center of power. She persuaded Suleiman to let her and her sons stay in Istanbul. Then, she convinced him to move the entire Imperial Harem from its traditional home in the Old Palace to the Grand Topkapi Palace, the administrative heart of the empire. This was a brilliant move. It kept her close to Suleiman and right at the center of political life, a decision made final after a fire damaged the Old Palace in 1541. Then came the most stunning move of all. Around 1534, Suleiman did the unthinkable. He freed Harem from slavery and legally married her. For centuries, sultans had not married their concubines. By making Harem his lawful wife, he gave her a status no woman of her background had ever dreamed of. A special title was created just for her, Haseki Sultan, the chief consort. Now a queen, Harem began to wield real political power. She was Suleiman's chief advisor and confidant. When he was away on military campaigns, she was his eyes and ears in the capital, writing him letters detailing political events. She corresponded directly with foreign kings. She built powerful alliances, marrying her only daughter, Mirima, to Rustem Pasha, who later became Grand Vizier. With her son-in-law running the government, Harem had an iron grip on the state. Her rise wasn't without its dark side. Many historians believe she played a key role in the downfalls of 2 powerful men, the Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha, and most infamously, Suleiman's eldest son and heir, Prince Mustafa. By convincing Suleiman that his own son was plotting against him, she cleared the path to the throne for one of her own children. Harem's story is the ultimate example of what was possible inside the harem. She went from a nameless slave to a powerful queen, a co-ruler in all but name. She rewrote the rules, proving that a woman in the harem could be far more than just a companion or a mother. She could be a political force that would change the course of an empire. Hurrem Sultan's rise marked the beginning of a unique political era in the Ottoman Empire, Kadınlar Saltanatı, or the Sultanate of Women. This period, from the mid-16th to the late 17th century, witnessed the women of the Imperial Harem not just influencing, but actively ruling the empire from behind the palace walls. Hurrem's influence set the stage for a system where women wielded extraordinary power, not as passive figures but as political strategists. The heart of this power lay with the Valide Sultan, or the Queen Mother, who was no longer just a figurehead. With the decline of the tradition where a new sultan would execute his brothers, the princes were confined to the cage, within the palace. This isolation meant the princes grew up without experience in governance, leading them to rely entirely on their mothers once they ascended to the throne. In the absence of strong leadership, the Valide Sultans became de facto rulers, with women like Nurbanu Sultan and Safiye Sultan guiding the empire's diplomatic affairs, state appointments, and even managing the treasury. However, no woman's influence was more profound than Kösem Sultan. She wasn't merely a consort, she was a regent, wielding political power through her sons and grandson. Her reign, lasting for decades, was marked by meticulous political maneuvering. When her son Murad IV was too young to rule, Kösem took charge, attending imperial council meetings behind a curtain, ensuring her decisions shaped the empire. Her political savvy was unmatched, as she controlled a vast network of spies and supporters. Kösem's authority extended even when her grandson, Mehmed IV, took the throne. This stirred tension with his mother, Turhan Sultan, who plotted Kösem's demise, fearing she might replace Mehmed with another heir. In a tragic turn of events, Kösem was assassinated in 1651, ending the reign of the most influential woman in Ottoman history. The power struggle between grandmother and mother highlighted the sheer political influence the women of the harem had at the time. This era, often misrepresented in Western narratives, proves that the women of the harem were not simply pawns of seduction, but sharp political figures who navigated the complex systems of power within the empire, shaping its fate for generations. The legacy of the women of the Ottoman harem went beyond the palace walls, influencing culture, religion, and architecture. Women like Hurrem Sultan and Safiye Sultan commissioned grand mosque complexes, schools, and hospitals, cementing their status as both pious figures and powerful rulers. These structures, such as the Yeni Valide Mosque, were not just architectural marvels, but symbols of their authority and influence on the public. Beyond architecture, these women played active roles in diplomacy, engaging with European monarchs like Queen Elizabeth I through correspondence. Their political impact was also seen in the strategic marriages of their daughters to powerful men, strengthening alliances that ensured loyalty to their rule. The harem, once mythologized in Western art, was revealed by historians as a complex political institution. Far from being mere objects of desire, these women were skilled politicians, wielding immense power in an empire that shaped history for centuries. Their influence extended into the fabric of Ottoman society, leaving a lasting legacy. The story of the Ottoman harem is a powerful reminder that history is often far more complex and surprising than the myths we're told. If you found this journey behind the silken curtains fascinating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into hidden histories. And let us know in the comments. Which powerful woman from the harem do you find most compelling? Was it the revolutionary Hurrem, the formidable Kösem, or someone else who fought her way to the top? Let's discuss it below. The Imperial Harem was a world of contradictions. It was a golden cage, a place of servitude where a woman's past was erased. Yet, within that gilded prison, it was also a unique arena of female power and achievement. It was a place where a slave could become a queen, where a mother could rule an empire, and where women wielded real political, social, and economic influence. The women of the harem were not the one-dimensional figures of fantasy. They were strategists, diplomats, patrons of art, and political masterminds. They navigated a system of deadly rivalries and strict rules to not only survive but thrive, leaving a permanent mark on one of history's greatest empires. The forbidden halls of the Ottoman Harem were not just a sultan's playground, they were a powerhouse, run by some of the most remarkable and influential women in history.